days of remembrance in Jubilee 623? Since that's something
Sure.
that you don't see in the canon, but you see in Jubilees when it comes to calendar.
Yeah. If you would pull the thing back up there, we've actually got a section of the slides. I think it's a little ways above the Passover timing of Passover ones we went through that we can pull up and go over that. But a lot of people confuse the days of remembrance or the new moon days. You see a lot of people actually keeping new moon days. Like they look for the moon, so they're on the Zadok calendar, but then they look for the new moon, and they keep that as like a feast or a Sabbath day or a day of rest or whatever. They don't work or all different things that people do. And if you look in Enoch, sorry Matt, it's somewhere in there.
Well, I think this here, I think this ties in a lot with what we're talking about right now. New
go ahead
moon versus Kodesh. Because if you look, that term new moon in Hodesh, if you the Masoretic was written between like 500 and 700 AD. So if you go back to the Septuagint, which predates that by almost 1,000 years, we're into the almost 2nd century BC. And you look at the first mention of that term new moon as it's translated in the English, you find that in 1 Samuel. That goes to that event actually of David and Saul. But if you take that same word that's used in the Septuagint, now let's go fast forward to the New Testament to Paul in Colossians, he uses it there. It's so the word is pneumonia. It's a compound of nuos and men, so it means new month. The word men is month in Greek, and it's never ever associated with the moon. The word for moon in Greek is selene. So when you look at just the difference between like the Septuagint and the Masoretic, you have a massive difference there as well, because it's interesting to find. You got to look at the history of where all this stuff comes from, so we truly understand the text that we're working with. The root word for Masoretic is Masorah, and it means a collection of traditions. And so when you look at it from that perspective and how those traditions have influenced the translators, now you kind of get to see the bigger picture of what we're dealing with. And so when they use that, they translate that term Hodesh as new moon, I think that's a grave error. And it's led to a great deal of confusion amongst people when talking about the calendar in specific, because they think it's tied in directly with the moon versus just being a renewing of the month.
Yep. If you go to slide 28, Matt, that's the slide I was talking about, I believe. No, that was good. It plays into it. So this is what people are talking about in Jubilee 623 through 29. The new moon of the first month, and of the fourth month, and of the seventh month, and of the 10th month. And so people will actually observe those new moons, even though they're keeping this calendar. They'll look for the sliver moon, and then they'll observe that as a special day. But really, it means Chodesh, like Matt just explained. It means it's a renewal, or the first day of the next month, basically. And so on the first day, if you do the new moons, okay, if you actually do the new moons, they won't line up with any of the things that happened. If you go to the next slide, Matt, we can actually see in Numbers 10, on the first day of your months, you shall blow the trumpets over your offerings. That's the word Hodesh. And then if you want to go to the next one,
Here it goes.
Yeah. So it came about in the 601st year, in the first month, on the first day of the month, the water was dried up from the earth. So Jubilees tells us that this is what happened in Genesis 8:13. So that's the new moon. And Genesis tells us it's the first day of the first month, the Hodesh. So it's actually, all you got to do is put the two together, so obviously the people that are doing this already are considering Jubilees to be something they believe and trust, and all you got to do is go look at the dates it's mentioning in Genesis, and it tells you they're on the first day of the month, not on the new moons. So it's just simple.
A lot of things happened on the first day of the months in many cases, especially the ones that are called out in particular. Days of Remembrance. It's the day that Yah remembered, right?
Yep.
It's the day Yah remembered Noah. It's the day, you know, and it's kind of tied into.
And if you go back to,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, if you go back to Jubilee 6, go back to Jubilee 6. It tells you in that passage. So I think it's the next one. It tells you what happened each of those 4 days in Jubilees.
Right.
So if you could zoom in on 6, it's the one 23 through 29. I think it's the next one. Down.
Up or down? There you
go. Down. Yeah, there it is. So if you can zoom in, I don't know if you can, the way we set this up, but on the says Noah ordained them as feasts for the generations forever, and then it tells you the 4 things that happened on each of those 4 days. I'm going to let you finish because I can't quite read it at the size it is. Are you able to enlarge the font there?
Let's see here. Yeah, I don't know if I can get it.
Oh, here we go. I can read it now. So, there we go. So it says on the new month, it says new moon in this text, but it's the Chodesh of the first month. He was bidden to make for himself an ark, so that's what happened. And then on that day, the earth became dry, and he opened the ark and saw the earth. And on the new month, or the Chodesh of the 4th month, the mouths of the depths of the abyss were closed. And on the first day of the 7th month, all the mouths of the abysses of the earth were opened, and the waters began to descend into them. And on the first day of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains were seen. So that's how it should read, because the problem is Jubilees 6 actually several times contradicts itself the way it's written in English, because later in the chapter it says, if you follow the motions of the moon, you'll be off from the start of the year by 10 days. But then it says, then it calls all the months, or new moons, and it says that you have to keep the new moons. So it doesn't even make sense. But that's because translator bias has translated Chodesh as new moon in some places, not everywhere.
Yeah, in the most context, it makes sense as month, especially in Leviticus 23.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
And many other places in the canon.
Right. Well, the interesting thing is all the times where they use the word new moon, or the words new moon, it's all around the feast days. All the other times when it's talking about months, it says, or when it uses the word Chodesh, it just says month, or first of the month, or whatever of the month. But when they get around the feast, when they know the people are going to be looking at the text to see how to keep the feast days, then they translate it as new moon. It's only translated 20 times as new moon, and it's all around the feast days. 254 times it's translated as month. So
that's where the tradition comes in. I mean,
there's no bias with that.
Yep.